They say family gatherings are meant to be places of love, laughter, and unity, a place where walls come down, and everyone is reminded of what truly matters. But what happens when those walls are torn apart not by outsiders, but by the very people you trusted most? If you're watching this right now, I want you to stay with me until the very end, because what I am about to share is not just another story. It's about betrayal, resilience, dignity, and the moment I had to choose between silence and standing up for my daughter. And before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, because here, we bring you powerful stories that aren't just told, they're felt. So let me take you back to that night, the night of the family party that changed everything. The house was glowing with string lights, laughter spilled out of the windows, and music pulsed from the living room. It was the kind of evening that, from the outside, looked perfect. Relatives gathered with plates of food, children running across the hall, elders sitting on couches recalling old tales. My daughter, my pride and joy, had been excited for weeks about this party. She had spent hours choosing her dress, carefully styling her hair into long, flowing braids she loved so much, and even asked me twice that morning if she looked beautiful. "You're always beautiful," I told her. And she beamed, because at her young age, confidence came not from makeup or fancy jewelry, but from the simple reassurance of being loved. When we arrived, she rushed ahead of me, eager to play with her cousins. I remember her giggling, her dress swaying as she darted into the crowd of children. I mingled with relatives, exchanged polite smiles, and settled into small talk with an uncle who hadn't stopped boasting about his new car. Everything seemed ordinary, until I noticed something strange. A group of people in the corner, laughing a little too hard, eyes glancing toward the staircase. My stomach tightened, though I didn't know why. I brushed it off at first, convincing myself it was nothing. But mothers always know when something is wrong. Minutes later, I heard it. A sudden ripple of laughter, louder than the music, and then a sound I can only describe as cruel delight. I turned toward the source and froze. There she was, my daughter, standing in the center of the living room, her small hands trembling at her sides, her once beautiful braids gone. Her head was shaved. Completely. The room spun around me, my heart pounded in my ears, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. I saw her eyes searching for me, filled with confusion, humiliation, and betrayal. And standing next to her was my sister, grinning ear to ear, holding the electric clippers in her hand as if she had just pulled the funniest prank in the world. "Oh, relax," she said between bursts of laughter, waving off the gasps from a few relatives. "It's just a joke. Don't be so dramatic." The words cut through me like glass. My daughter's cheeks flushed with shame as people around her either chuckled nervously or looked away, unwilling to interfere. No one rushed to comfort her, no one stopped my sister. They all stood there as if this was entertainment. And in that moment, something inside me broke, not just because of what was done to my child, but because of the silence of those who claimed to be family. I ran to her, wrapping my arms around her shaking body, feeling her sobs rack through her chest. Her tears soaked my shirt as she whispered, "Mom, why would she do this? Was I bad?" My heart shattered at her words. No child should ever have to question their worth because of someone else's cruelty. I turned to my sister, my blood boiling, my voice trembling with fury. "How dare you?" I demanded. But she only smirked, shrugging her shoulders. "It's just hair. It'll grow back. You're making a big deal out of nothing." Her casual dismissal, her smug grin, the way she looked at me as if I was overreacting. It lit a fire in me I had never felt before. The room seemed to shrink, the voices around me blending into a dull roar of whispers and nervous laughter, but all I could focus on was my daughter's trembling hand gripping my sleeve like it was the only anchor keeping her from drowning in humiliation. I wanted to scream, to tear through every person who had the audacity to smile, chuckle, or worse, stay silent, but my throat was dry, my rage trapped inside my chest like a storm ready to split the earth in two. My sister leaned casually against the sofa, still holding the clippers as if she were proud of her work, like some twisted artist admiring a cruel masterpiece. Every second I stared at her, the reality of what she had done sank deeper into my bones. She hadn't just shaved my daughter's head, she had stripped her of dignity in front of an entire family that should have protected her. Why? I whispered, not even recognizing my own voice. It came out raw, fragile, as though the question was being asked not just of her, but of the universe. Why would anyone think this was funny? Why would anyone believe cruelty could pass as a joke? My sister rolled her eyes, sipping from her glass like she was above it all. You're too uptight. Always have been. Kids need to toughen up, learn to laugh at themselves. Don't act like this is the end of the world. Her words fanned the flames of my anger until I thought I might burst. I looked around the room, searching desperately for someone, anyone, who would step forward, who would say what we all knew, that this was wrong. But instead, I was met with lowered eyes, awkward coughs, and half-smiles plastered on faces too cowardly to confront the truth. I wanted to shake them all. How could they not see what was happening? How could they sit and sip their tea while a child's trust, innocence, and sense of self were shredded before their eyes? My daughter's sobs grew quieter, not because she was calming down, but because she was trying to make herself smaller, trying to disappear. The sight broke me. This wasn't about hair, it was about the humiliation of being laughed at by people she thought loved her, about the violation of someone taking her identity, her joy, and tossing it aside as a punchline. I pulled her closer, whispering into her ear, "You are beautiful. You are strong. Don't you ever believe otherwise." But I could feel her doubt pressing against me like a weight I couldn't lift alone. My sister smirked again, and for a brief moment, our eyes locked. It wasn't the smirk of someone who thought she had pulled off a harmless prank. It was darker. It was smug. It was the smirk of someone who wanted to hurt, who wanted power, who wanted to remind me that in her world, she could get away with anything. That's when I realized this wasn't just about my daughter. It was about me too. My sister had always been competitive, always looking for ways to undermine me in front of others. She had mocked my choices, criticized my parenting, compared our children, and picked apart my life with the precision of a vulture stripping meat from bones. But this crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. She had weaponized her cruelty not just against me, but against my child. And in doing so, she had ignited something in me that no amount of family pressure, no tradition of keeping peace, could ever silence again. I stood up slowly, still holding my daughter close, and addressed the room. My voice shook, but it was laced with a steel I hadn't felt in years. Every single one of you should be ashamed. You call yourselves family, yet you sit here laughing at a child's pain? You let her be humiliated and mocked as if it's entertainment? If this is what family means, then I want no part of it. Gasps rose around me, but no one dared to interrupt. For the first time, I saw fear flicker in my sister's eyes. She hadn't expected me to speak out. She had expected me to swallow my anger, paste on a smile, and pretend everything was fine, just as I had done countless times before when she'd crossed lines. But not tonight. Not when my daughter's tears still burned hot against my skin. I turned to my sister, my words sharp and deliberate. You think this is a joke? Look at her. Look at what you've done. You didn't just shave her head, you carved into her soul, and no apology will erase that. You think you're clever, that you've embarrassed us. But let me tell you something, the only embarrassment here is you. You showed this family exactly who you are. For the first time, her smile faltered. Her bravado slipped. And in the silence that followed, I realized the power wasn't hers anymore. It was mine. And it was my daughter's. The silence after my words was deafening, but it didn't last long. Like vultures circling over fresh prey, voices started to rise, hesitant at first, then louder, more defensive, as if the weight of truth was too heavy for them to bear. An uncle coughed nervously and muttered, "It was just hair, she'll be fine. You're blowing this out of proportion." My aunt chimed in, her tone sharp, "You're always so dramatic. Kids cry over everything these days. Don't make a scene in front of everyone." My fists clenched, nails digging into my palm until I felt the sting of blood. These were the same people who had once held my daughter as a newborn, the same people who claimed to love her, and now they were excusing cruelty as though it were a harmless mistake. But not everyone looked away. I caught my cousin shifting uncomfortably in her chair, her eyes darting between me and my sister. She didn't speak, but I could see in her expression the guilt of someone who knew this had gone too far. Beside her, her teenage son avoided my gaze, clearly shaken by the tears streaming down my daughter's face. A quiet battle was brewing in the room. Between those who wanted to keep the peace by burying the truth and those who, even in their silence, understood that something irreparable had just happened. My sister finally broke the tension, her voice dripping with condescension. "Oh, please. Don't act like I've committed a crime. It's just hair, it grows back. She'll laugh about this one day, if you stop filling her head with weakness." That word, weakness, cut me deeper than any insult. It wasn't my daughter who was weak, it was this family's twisted version of strength, mocking, belittling, crushing anyone who dared to be vulnerable. I looked down at my daughter, her face blotchy from crying, her hands covering her head as if to hide from the world. Weakness? No. This child had endured more in one night than most of the so-called adults in the room ever had the courage to face. I knelt down, lifting her chin gently until her eyes met mine. "You don't ever have to laugh at your own pain to make others comfortable," I whispered, making sure every single person in that room heard me. "And you are not weak. You are braver than all of them combined." Her lip trembled, but she nodded, clinging to me tighter than before. For the first time that night, I felt her grip not just out of fear, but out of trust. That's when my father spoke up. His voice was stern, commanding, the way it always had been when he wanted to end an argument. "Enough. This is a family gathering, not a circus. She'll get over it. And you," he pointed at me with the same authority that had once terrified me as a child, "you will not shame your sister in front of everyone. Apologize." My heart dropped into my stomach. Apologize? To her? To the woman who had stripped my child's dignity for her own amusement? The room held its breath, waiting for me to fold, waiting for me to back down and keep the family peace as I always had. But something inside me snapped. Years of biting my tongue, of letting slights pass, of enduring criticism and jabs for the sake of harmony, they all boiled up once. I stood taller, squaring my shoulders, my voice trembling but unbroken. "No. Not this time. I will never apologize for protecting my daughter. And if you think I should, then maybe it's time I walk away from this family altogether." Gasps rippled through the room like a wave, some shocked, some disbelieving, some relieved. The air thickened with tension, but in that moment, I didn't care. I had chosen my daughter. I had chosen truth over tradition, dignity over silence. And for the first time in years, I felt the faintest flicker of power shift, not toward my sister, not toward the so-called elders who thought they ruled us all, but toward me and the child trembling in my arms. The days after the party felt like walking through an invisible battlefield. Whispers trailed us everywhere. Inside the family, in the neighborhood, even in the school hallways where my daughter once skipped with laughter but now kept her head low, tugging at her hoodie strings to hide the cruel evidence of what was done to her. Children are merciless when they sense weakness, and they circled her like sharks scenting blood. Baldy. Egghead. Cancer girl. The words weren't just insults, they were knives, each one twisting deeper into her spirit. And though I reminded her daily that her beauty was not tied to hair, the mirror was unforgiving. Every morning she'd stare at her reflection, touch the stubble on her scalp, and whisper with a brokenness too heavy for a child, "Why did Auntie do this to me?" At home, my phone became a weapon turned against me. Family group chats exploded with messages, some mocking me for overreacting, some chastising me for disrespecting my father at the party, some suggesting that I should teach my daughter to toughen up instead of making her a victim. My sister, smug as ever, posted pictures on social media with captions dripping in sarcasm. Family jokes gone too far? Or just people being dramatic? Hashtag lighten up, hashtag it's just hair. The comments under her post were filled with laughing emojis, encouragement from her circle of friends, and a handful of strangers who didn't even know us but still chose to pile onto my daughter's suffering. Every notification felt like a slap, a reminder that cruelty had found an audience willing to clap for it. But amid the noise, something unexpected happened. A few quiet messages began to trickle into my inbox, private notes from cousins, distant relatives, even acquaintances who had been at the party. I didn't agree with what happened. I think your sister went too far. I'm sorry I didn't say anything that night. The words were timid, careful, as if the senders feared being targeted next if they spoke too loudly. Still, it gave me a flicker of hope. Proof that beneath the toxic laughter and tradition of silence, not everyone was blind. Some had seen my daughter's tears and recognized the cruelty for what it was. At school, though, the hope was harder to hold. One afternoon, my daughter came home, threw her backpack to the floor, and collapsed into my arms, sobbing so hard her tiny frame shook. Through her gasp she confessed, "They pulled my hat off, Mom." In the cafeteria, everyone laughed. My chest tightened with a rage I had never known before. The humiliation had followed her beyond the family walls. It was now shaping her world, carving scars on her confidence that I feared might never fade. I wanted to storm the school, to demand accountability from every parent who had failed to teach their child kindness. But when I looked into her trembling eyes, I knew what she needed wasn't my fury. She needed my unwavering steadiness, the kind of love that could rebuild what had been broken piece by piece. So that night, I sat with her on the edge of her bed, holding her hand, and I made a vow. They can laugh, they can mock, they can try to tear you down. But you will rise, baby. Because we are stronger than their cruelty. And I promise, one day, they'll regret ever thinking they could define you by this moment. She sniffled, burying her face in my chest, and whispered back, "Promise?" I kissed the top of her head, where soft bristles were beginning to grow. Promise. But even as I spoke those words, a part of me trembled. Because promises are heavy things, and I wasn't sure how to shield her from a world that seemed determined to strip her dignity for the entertainment of others. I only knew one truth: I could no longer remain passive in the face of cruelty, not from family, not from strangers, not from anyone. This wasn't just about hair anymore. It was about dignity, identity, and the power of a mother's love against a storm that refused to die down. The storm couldn't last forever, at least, that's what I kept telling myself. Yet it wasn't until months later, when my daughter's hair began to grow back in soft waves and her shoulders started to straighten under the weight she had carried, that the shift truly began. Her resilience surprised me. She began sketching in her notebooks, portraits of girls with shaved heads, queens wearing crowns over bald scalps, warriors wielding swords with fierce eyes that looked a lot like hers. Slowly, she was turning her pain into art, into power. And one afternoon, she looked at me with a steady gaze and said, "Mom, I don't want to hide anymore." That day, she walked out of the house without a hat or a hoodie, her head held higher than I had seen since before the party. For the first time, it wasn't me shielding her. It was her choosing to face the world as she was. But the true reckoning came at another family gathering, one I almost didn't attend. My gut twisted with dread at the thought of seeing the same faces that had laughed at my daughter's tears. Yet she was the one who insisted. "We're going," she told me. "I want them to see me." There was steel in her voice, and I realized she wasn't asking, she was leading. So we went. When we walked into the room, conversations faltered. Eyes darted to her head, no longer hidden, her chin lifted like a defiant banner. My sister, lounging with her usual smirk, opened her mouth to speak, but this time, it was my daughter who stopped her. "You think shaving my head made me small?" Her voice rang out, trembling at first but gaining strength with every word. "It made me stronger than you will ever be. Because I survived your cruelty. I survived your laughter. And now everyone here knows what you did wasn't a joke, it was bullying. And bullies don't win." The room went silent, the kind of silence that weighs heavier than any insult. My sister's smirk faltered, her cheeks flushed, and for once she had no witty comeback. My daughter stood there, radiating something far greater than anger, she radiated truth. I felt tears sting my eyes, not from sadness but from pride so fierce it nearly knocked me to my knees. This child, my child, had taken the wound carved into her and turned it into armor. The very people who once excused my sister's cruelty now shifted uncomfortably in their seats, some even nodding subtly in my daughter's direction. The power dynamic had shifted completely. No longer the butt of a cruel joke, she had become the voice everyone was forced to hear, the mirror they couldn't look away from. Later that night, when the crowd had thinned and my sister avoided me like a shadow, my daughter and I sat together under the stars. She leaned her head against my shoulder and whispered, "We're free, aren't we?" And for the first time since that awful night, I answered without hesitation, "Yes. We're free. Because you chose to be." So if you're watching this, if you've ever been humiliated, mocked, or made to feel small for the entertainment of others, I want you to remember this: your scars are not shame, they are proof of your survival. And sometimes, the greatest revenge is not anger, but rising so high above the cruelty that those who tried to break you can no longer reach you. Sparkles, if this story touched you, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to Grow for Justice, because together, we'll keep telling the stories that remind us strength isn't always loud, but it is always unbreakable.